Hey there, folks. Hope you're doing well today. Today, we wanted to explore the idea whether a bombing campaign can produce regime change. Because when people talk about modern warfare, there's often an assumption that advanced air power can force political change. The idea seems intuitive. If a country's military bases, command centers, and infrastructure are all destroyed from the air, surely the government will eventually collapse. But decades of research suggests that reality is far more complicated. Political scientist Robert A. Pape has spent much of his career studying air warfare. His research examined campaigns dating back to World War I. After analyzing dozens of conflicts, he reached a striking conclusion that bombing campaigns may destroy targets, but they almost never overthrow governments by themselves. In other words, air power can win battles, but that does not necessarily translate into political victory. Pape describes something he calls the smart bomb trap. Modern weapons are incredibly precise. Bombs can strike individual buildings, bunkers, or military installations with remarkable accuracy. Because these attacks are all visible and measured, it can give the appearance that the strategy is working and leaders will often believe it. Infrastructure will get destroyed, enemy positions disappear on satellites, commanders report successful strikes. But according to Pape, this can create a dangerous illusion. Tactical success does not automatically equal strategic success. Destroying a building or equipment does not necessarily change the political calculations of a government or the will of a population. And so, bombing can often even strengthen a target. Let's explore this idea. Another key insight from historical studies of air warfare is that bombing frequently produces the opposite political effect from what planners expect. Rather than weakening a government, bombing campaigns can often strengthen national unity. When civilians are attacked or threatened, populations frequently respond with anger toward the attacker, increased nationalism, and stronger loyalty to their leadership. Instead of collapsing, societies under attack sometimes become more determined to resist. So, this is one reason bombing alone rarely triggers the internal political collapse needed for regime change. Another concept frequently discussed by military analysts is the escalation trap. It happens when bombing campaigns fail to achieve the desired political outcome. Leaders then assume the strategy simply needs more intensity. So the response becomes more strikes, more targets, more escalation. History shows this pattern repeatedly.
7 days into the Iran war, the United States has given Tehran an ultimatum as the capital suffers its heaviest bombardment yet. The death toll rising again as Iran launches new strikes, and Lebanon is pounded in a devastating attack.
Wars escalate because leaders believe additional force will finally produce the political result that earlier strikes failed to achieve. So let's look at some historical examples. During the Blitz, Nazi Germany attempted to break British morale through sustained bombing. Cities were devastated and thousands of civilians were killed. But the expected political collapse never came. Instead, British society became more unified and determined to resist. We could also look to the strategic bombing in World War II. The Allies also conducted massive bombing campaigns against Nazi Germany. Cities like Dresden and Hamburg experienced devastating attacks. These campaigns destroyed enormous amounts of infrastructure and caused widespread civilian casualties. Yet, post-war research suggests something surprising. German industrial production continued for much of the war, and not only that, but civilian morale did not collapse in the way planners had expected. So let's instead look to when regime change has worked. There are some cases where governments were successfully replaced after large wars, but those cases involve something far more extensive than bombing. Like after World War II, the governments of Germany and Japan were replaced. However, those outcomes required total military defeat, foreign occupation, long-term political reconstruction. In other words, the wars did not end with air power alone. It ended with armies occupying territories and reshaping political systems. And so we get to this broader lesson that we learn from many military historians. And it's this idea that war is ultimately political, not just military. Bombing campaigns can destroy infrastructure, weaken military capabilities, and eliminate specific targets, but those actions alone rarely force a society to abandon its government. Political change usually requires deeper shifts, internal pressure, military defeat, or long-term occupation. Now, not every scholar agrees with these conclusions. Some historians argue that air power can play a much larger role in political outcomes than the research suggests. Others believe bombing campaigns can work when combined with economic pressure, internal dissent, or ground forces. So the debate continues, but one point remains widely accepted among military analysts. Bombing alone rarely determines the political outcome of a war.